Rebonjour.
So, good morning again. So, thank you, Chief Picard, for this introduction, because my topic has to do with history. We are on the same wavelength. Via Rail Canada, and for us it's an opportunity for the Canadians to listen, to learn, and to experience Canada.
Said, history should be at the source of anything we do about 2017. And as Canadians, we should all seek to understand our country better after 2017 than we do today. And when we say as Canadians, we should keep in mind that many of those Canadians were not here in '67, either because they're as young as the two of you, really, or they are part of the 250,000 Canadians that come to Canada every year since 1982. So when you think about it, every 10 years, a new Toronto is established in Canada. Un nouveau Toronto s'établit au Canada chaque année.
A new Toronto is established in Canada every 10 years. So they don't know Expo 67, don't know the song that I'm trying to forget, but that keeps coming back. And so this is a challenge for us, learning to experience Canada. So the railroad was at the origin of the physical settlement of constitutional Canada. The desire expressed by John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister of Canada, to build that ribbon of steel that would link the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, that would reach to Churchill and Hudson Bay. And so many Canadians and many Chinese immigrants have been working, and to the cost of their own lives, built what was a monument of engineering for a country of that size. So this is something that had not been done before in such conditions. But building Canada was more than only building a railroad. It was also bringing over populations at the time from Europe to settle Canada, or from Asia for the western part of the country. And so the railroad was the way to get there. People were coming at K21, Wharf 21 in Halifax, and they were brought to the various settlements in western Canada, and that's where the Ukrainian families, the Icelandic and Swedish families, German families who settled in the western prairies. At the origin of the history of Canada and of her coming of age.
Si la bataille de Vimy Ridge était l'établissement de la maturité du Canada, le chemin de fer a joué le rôle.
Vimy Ridge was the coming of age of Canada. The railway played the role to bring all those young Canadians to the various seaports where they left from to go and defend the Canadian values that are still there today, the freedom of their population and justice for all. And at the core of that transportation operation, there were the rail stations and the seaports. So you may look at them with some nostalgia, but we have to be mindful of what they did in the past. And that's why over the past few years, Via Rail developed partnerships that are allowing to grasp the symbolism of that history. First, an agreement with the Aboriginal populations and peoples of Canada, and the native people of Canada can travel at a reduced rate along all the Via Rail network across Canada, to recognize the fact that the railway has been built on the original territories of the Aboriginal peoples. And in the light of the immigration issues that I mentioned earlier, in 2012 we set a partnership with the Institute of Canadian Citizenship to encourage the new Canadians to discover Canada.
You're invited to take a trip on Via Rail at a highly discounted price anywhere in Canada. And as late as yesterday afternoon, we got a tweet from someone who was a new Canadian who said, "I just got my citizenship this morning, And I just realized that I'm eligible for this trip, and I'm taking a trip, 3 weeks, and I'm going out west to see the Rockies. Okay?
And this is a way for us, Canadians, to recognize the importance for the newcomers to discover Canada in her geography, but also in her population. I'll come back to that. The other elements in the Canadian forces in 2011 to recognize the past and present sacrifices of the families of the Canadian forces who are defending Canadian liberties around the world. We have concluded a similar agreement that allowed the active and retired members of the Canadian forces to board the train at favorable conditions. So the symbolism of the role of the railway through the history of Canada is still there today. And this leads me to the announcement of last week when we announced and Bank of Canada launched a new $10 bill so that each of you will have a Via Rail train in your own pocket starting next November, and the picture on the $10 bill is the section between Vancouver and Toronto that's called the Canadian, and on the other face of the bill you have John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada and the man of vision who launched this railway. The Via Rail network from coast to coast and up to Hudson Bay is serving Hudson Bay and some corridors like White River in northwestern Ontario because of the few other transportation alternatives to serve the Aboriginal peoples of the area. So that's my only advertisement for Via Rail. So a land to discover. The idea is for Canadians to discover Canada that up to 2017 and after that we're more knowledgeable about what Canada is, her geography first, and all her landscapes on the one hand, but also discovering by the same way the Canadian population. Aboard the train you're not only looking through the windows in excellent comfort, looking at the landscape, but you also have an opportunity to meet all kinds of people. People of the Canadian Forces, Aboriginal people who are traveling at rebate, and also other fellow Canadians like us here today. And through those encounters you learn to discover Canada, because Canada, beyond its mountains and lakes and rivers and forests, it's first people. And the train environment allows you to live a purely Canadian experience. At Via Rail we focus on a Canadian experience. The food that's being served come from the Canadian oceans and the Canadian lands. The wines that you're being served are Canadian wines. The artists aboard are Canadian artists. Entertainment on your iPad, on your smartphone. Starting in June will be the CBC programming, the National Film Board, Historic Dominion, and Telefilm Canada. So Canadian productions, so as Canadian taxpayers and Canadian citizens, you will have an opportunity to see Canadian productions and even possibly just for laugh productions one day. And therefore you'll have a purely Canadian experience. So that's the idea for 2017. So place Canadians in a situation that will allow them to share with one another, to get to know one another, and so that through this communication we are more knowledgeable about our country, and we also have an opportunity to discover our country, to discover ourselves through our history and our stories. And for a more personal moment, here's my own story. 1945, my mother, who was freed by Canadian soldiers in Belgium, took a ship up to Wharf 21, then boarded a train up to Montreal, and my father, who was a son of peasants in Italy, came to Canada because he was on the wrong side. So in Italy, so he came to Canada, so he was harvesting tobacco in the Joliette area. So the two of them meet here in Montreal in 1953. And so here's the result in 1956. Here I am. So when we're talking of our origins, our ancestors, where we're coming from, each of us in this room has a different story. My story goes back to 1945, 1951, and is filled with military memories and what Canada would represent for my parents at the time. And as we heard from Chief Picard, for the Aboriginal peoples, it go back centuries and millenniums back. It's a benefit for us to know this history, because that's where we'll find the courage and the vision to build our future and to build a better place than the one we have today. Allow me to conclude by quoting Leo Tolstoy, and if I could even paraphrase him.
I would say that everything that I understand about Canada is because I love this country. Et comme moi, je pense que vous aimez ce pays.
Like me, I'm sure that you love this country, and I thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that. And you know, you speak about the storied history of Via Rail, and I'm curious to know, you know, it has this almost this romantic idea to it. I mean, you mentioned that the quote is actually quite appropriate. Do you think that perception, that experience has changed very much over the years? Comment est-ce que l'expérience de voyager en train, ça a changé pendant les années?
Oui, c'est une très bonne question. Je pense que le train est une image encore très nostalgique. Je pense qu'on pense encore au train de façon très nostalgique. Mais dans les dernières années, je dirais dans le courant des 10 dernières années, en raison, entre autres, de l'évolution des trains de banlieue dans les grands centres urbains, l'évolution des trains de banlieue rend le train un peu plus actuel. Et nous, chez Via Rail, évidemment, on s'active à le moderniser, comme je disais tantôt, le Wi-Fi, le divertissement à bord. Et donc, on essaie d'amener un peu de modernité.
So we are bringing some modernity so that Canadians can realize that we can go from Montreal to Toronto in 4 hours and a half. And so it is a very attractive alternative to your car and to other possibilities. So we are involved in modernizing, of course, but we are a car culture in North America, and the image of the train is tainted with nostalgia, but we hope to change that shortly, and that people will see the train in a much more up-to-date way as an alternative interstate transportation
why
media.
don't you guys have those 50% off sales more often?
Let me show you the pictures of my daughters, and then you'll understand why we can't afford them. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.